Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Mr. R Show and the Political Purge podcast. Today, for the first time in the podcast history, me and Ashton are in the same place, same time, doing one together, and it is for a very, very special reason, Ashton, and guys listening at home, and that is we're doing a presidential tier list. If you don't know what that is, then you have not been on the internet the past year because it is taken over everywhere. It's very simple. You have different tiers and you rank whichever category you're ranking based on the tiers. So instead of just doing like a top 10 or top 20, or in this case top 45 for all the presidents, we do it based on tiers. Our tiers today are S, which is like godlike, best of the best. Then you go into the normal letter grading, A, B, C, D, F, and stuff like that. For some reason here we put F above D. I'll go ahead and fix that right there. And then we're going to have a special tier we like to call, who cares? Meaning, no one really knows who these guys are other than presidents.
They didn't have big impact like that dude who died after 3 weeks of being president.
Yeah, people that didn't do too much or just were kind of filler presidents, if you will. Kind of, I don't know where we're going to put Gerald Ford, but he could be a person that could be the who cares category there. But Ashton, we all hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving. We're coming back on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. A safe Thanksgiving with, how the COVID pandemic's been. But this is something we're trying out. It's going to be fun. We're excited for it. We have been wanting to do a presidential ranking for a long time. Wasn't sure how to do it because, let's be honest, 45 presidents it's not ideal. It's a lot of presidents to do, 1 through 45. I think this tier ranking is just going to be a little bit better and a little bit easier. So, without further ado, here's the rankings. All right, Ashton, first president up to debate today, and that is good old son Bush, George W. Bush. I will let you start. Where do you see George W. Bush fitting into this tier list?
Andy, I gotta go with a C tier for good old W. I know a lot of our more liberal viewers will not like hearing that. For all his flaws, and he does have a lot, he didn't do a lot on, let's say, policy when it comes to domestic, but he was decent wartime president. There is a reason why he got reelected. He was a good speaker. And I think he's an average president. I think his approval rating has proven to climb back up. And you just compare him to more recent presidents, Andy, you start to realize George Bush was really an average president. So I say C.
I'm going to go, Ashton, with the D tier for George W. Bush. And this gives our audience the first kind of thing that we're going to do. So if, by chance, like we have here, he has a tier above, I have a tier below, we're going to automatically put him in the lower tier unless one of us can convince the other one, which I don't think we're going to with any kind of argument here. So he's going to go into George W. Bush, our first president, is going to go to the D tier. If by happenstance one of us picks, let's say, him for B and him and me pick him for D, it would go to C as the average. So that's how we're going to do it, and that's why George W. Bush is our first D tier president, Ashton. Next up, Ashton, is James Buchanan, the most famous president coming before Abraham Lincoln. I can see you have some few choice words for him. How do you rank him?
I gotta put him an F, Andy. He was the president that kind of just sat there and let the country split apart. And he wasn't necessarily active in that endeavor, but that's the point. He wasn't active when the country was just fighting each other, and it was clear that there was going to be a lot of bloodshed if nothing was done, and he chose to do nothing. He just sat back and kind of chose to ignore the issues of the day.
Yeah, Ashton, the best I would put him at as a D tier anyways, so that would move him into the F tier automatically. I'll go ahead and slide him there. Our second president today. Terrible president, just didn't do anything when you knew this country was going. You had terrible acts like the Kansas-Nebraska Act, so it just was bad. I wouldn't say that, people can argue that the Civil War was inevitable anyways. We're not going to get into that, but he sure as heck accelerated it quickly because he did nothing to help the seeds of division that were sown.
If anything, he agitated it.
Correct. Moving on to the peanut farmer, and this actually gets me to our point that if you follow us and subscribe to our channel, please subscribe. Throw that out there right now. If you like our videos, like we do the Presidential Smackdown, you will know that President Carter is dominating in that series. Go check that out if you want to see him dominate. But as a president, I'm going to start this one. I think that he was, I'm not going to say underrated, but if it wasn't for just a few things like the refugee crisis and the gas prices when he came into office and all those kind of bad things, he probably wouldn't have been as not favored in the one-term president that he was. That being said, you can't ignore those things. He is a one-term president, which hurts his tier ranking, so I really have to put him at that C average tier.
Yeah, and he's a very great guy. Probably if we did a former president's tier ranking, he would be S tier. He is amazing former president. But as president, I gotta go with I gotta go D. Gotta go D. And I gotta go D for the former peanut farmer because honestly, Andy, his reaction or lack of inaction when it comes to certain crises under him kind of let a lot of stuff stagnate, including the economy, foreign policy. Like almost every part of his presidency had some issue or just some sort of crisis, and you can't ignore that. You put it all together. He's a nice guy, but just because you're a nice guy doesn't mean you did a good job.
Yeah, I get that one, Ashton. I wish it could have been a little bit higher, but it happens. That's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Poor peanut farmer there. But Ashton, moving on to kind of a boring president that maybe we can debate to put in the who cares tier, and that's Chester A. Arthur himself.
1881, 1885. He is a Reconstruction Republican president. To me, Reconstruction is an era full of politicians kind of just delaying the inevitable, which is letting the South do whatever it wanted. And eventually the Republicans would go on to let that happen. Eventually, I'll say it's who cares. That's
yeah,
my vote.
it's a good. We're putting. Come on. No one. Chester. If I pull up the word Chester A. Arthur, what comes to your mind? And most people are gonna say who. So he gets the who cares one, not because he's a president. Obviously, you have to respect the man, but it's just no. He didn't do anything very worthwhile, if you will. So, moving on, Ashton, to the president that was a two-term president in non-consecutive terms and coming right after Chester A. Arthur, who cares himself. That's Grover Cleveland with his nice mustache there. What tier do you have him going in?
Ooh. I gotta put him, while it's impressive he won a second term non-consecutively, that's not easy to do. To lose, or to become president, lose, and then to go on being known you're a loser, to go on and beat the guy who beat you. That's very that's very weird. It doesn't happen often, but he also did happen to preside over a downturn of the economy, one of the biggest recessions in the 19th century. So I gotta give him a C. He was one of the only Democrats to end up winning in this time period. That's also impressive. So I would say the weight of his accomplishments kind of bring him up to that average president.
Yeah, Ashton, he was not good when it came to trying to help all the big monopolies from forming. You saw right before Theodore Roosevelt, which we'll get to later, came in and busted up the monopolies with his big shtick. That he didn't do much. You got to give him the points. I think he goes from a D to a C tier because of him winning 2 non-consecutive terms. That's very rare from happening. It may happen again, but I doubt it in this day and age. But
he's the only president to ever do that.
So I'll put him in that C tier. Welcome to the average tier, Mr. Arthur himself. Moving along, Ashton, and that is an impeached president. No, with the woman, Bill Clinton. This is an interesting one, and I will start. I think Bill Clinton with NAFTA had some mistakes. NAFTA was a decent idea, but caused a lot of American jobs to be lost between the 90s and the 2000s to the current times. I think obviously being an impeached president, being in a scandal will bring yourself down. But if you take away those parts of it, he did some good things, had some good environmental policies, but never really got to accomplish much. He was much. I was watching a very good video the other day that kind of compared him to being kind of the president that just during a good period of time when America is not really in any kind of conflict or any kind of huge problem like with, let's say, COVID or the Great Depression.
Right
he's a
after
president.
Cold War.
He's a president that just kind of sits there, doesn't hurt, doesn't help. So I'm okay with him at the. I'll put him at the C tier solely because of the impeachment.
I gotta put him at the A tier, Andy.
Oh, so B. I was thinking B too. So B's fine with me with Bill Clinton.
Yeah, my reasoning is I think he was, as a steward of the economy and the president, or steward of the economy and just national defense, I thought he was very strong. He was a solid person who tried to work across aisles, and he did a good job at it. And I guess the reason why he isn't higher S tier is mainly because, Andy, like you said, he had some scandals. He wasn't ever able to kind of make you feel like he was completely honest with you as a politician. So
he had the just kind of charisma. It's kind of like, is he telling me straight? I can't tell.
Yeah, he had a lot of charisma. So I'll give him that. So I give him A, you give him C.
Yep. Put him in that B category.
All right, Andy, let's go ahead and talk about Calvin Coolidge.
Do we have to?
Yeah, this is who cares, Andy? Because Calvin Coolidge, he was one of those roaring 20s presidents who, let's say, oversaw a great economic boom off of credit, which, let's say, kind of crushed the economy for 20 years afterwards.
Yeah, he was the president that was right next to Mr. Hoover, who we'll get to right next to. We're going to talk about him a lot with what he did, but I can put Coolidge with who cares. No one, I mean, he was there for 8 years, yet nobody really knows what he did other than just see the economy want to collapse. So, who cares about Coolidge? Moving on, Ashton, to Herbert Hoover. We just talked about how...
F.
Yeah, he's one of the worst presidents of all time. How do you have something as bad as the biggest depression in American history and maybe the world's history? Just so bad because of credit, because of the war. Everything was terrible about the Great Depression, and he said, "Do nothing; it will go over." It was terrible.
That sounds like someone I know.
It sounds terrible. It was just a terrible president. I mean, obviously he was the president, was never going to get a second term, and the Americans hated him. Was the perfect president to introduce FDR, a very left-leaning president, even in today's terms, left-leaning president, and it caused him to be one of the well-liked presidents that he is. But one of the worst presidents has to be Herbert Hoover. All right, Ashton, going to the president who died within basically a week of becoming president, and that is William Henry Harrison. Honestly, that's who cares. I mean, he didn't do anything. He was in office for a full, according to the record books, a month. So he couldn't have done anything, really.
I'll give him a D, Andy, because he is a politician that most Americans will like because he did absolutely nothing to affect their lives.
I would agree with you, but I really don't feel comfortable putting him at the F tier because he's not a bad president. He didn't do anything.
I'm kidding. You can put him in who cares.
Okay, we're putting... Who cares? Sorry, you died. Okay, moving on to Dwight Eisenhower. He's an interesting one, a war general president. You can see how we've had some decent ones with Grant, sort of. But how would you rank him?
Well, Andy, I think he oversaw a really good moment in American history. And he was a good steward of it. I thought he was strong on foreign policy. I think he's a good B-level president. He was good, above average. He wasn't special or excellent. You're not going to remember any big quotes. You're not going to go and watch speeches of his and be blown away. But you got to respect the man. He did a great job managing the country.
He oversaw the interstate system, which, environmentally speaking, was bad, but it really progress the country with technology, with communication, with relationship-wise, interrelationship within the states, help build the unity within the country. But the one negative I'll give our friend Ike here would be his kind of Red Scare policies in the Cold War, moving to that. I understand where you're coming from. You're scared of the communism coming into the country, but I feel like they kind of took it overboard with things, kind of use it kind of to their gain to have a little bit of corruption in there. But I'll still give him. You said B tier, so I'll agree with you with a B tier. He's a nice, friendly old guy who didn't do too much to hurt the country and helped in ways that are good. So solid B.
Ooh. Andy.
Big
boy
Taft. Big boy Tub
Taft.
Taft. Ashton, what can we say about Howard, the middleman Taft?
Well, his presidency was exactly like his presidential smackdown ambitions. Terrible.
Go check it out, guys.
Yeah, I think the ironic thing is if you look into him and how he got pushed by Teddy to run, and he didn't want to run at all. And then he wanted to spite Teddy by running for his second term, and they both ended up losing that election. I believe it was 1912. Andy, I gotta go with the F with him. He kinda didn't do much. He was more lax than Teddy after he got elected because he promised Teddy he would be a big buster like Teddy was. But
Big boy Taft buster over there.
yeah, but he didn't bust much. He was actually kind of friendly to big business, and that did not make Teddy happy.
I will say he did bust something, Ashton. That is the tub that he got stuck in. They had to bust him out of that one. I got D tier, but he'll automatically go in the F tier because of that. So sorry, Taft. Just like your presidential SmackDown appearance, you're trash. Complete trash. Moving on, Ashton, to a little Whig party, man. Millard Fillmore.
Who cares?
Man, that took you forever to say that one, Ashton. But yeah, I mean, no one cares about Millard Fillmore. Do you even know who that is when I say Millard Fillmore? No, he didn't do anything. He's a Whig. Whigs haven't done anything for this country. I know that's kind of a hot take, but it's true. Moving on to maybe a consecutive who cares, maybe? And that's Gerald Ford. I mean, he came after Nixon, did nothing, and didn't win again. I mean, I'm okay with him with the who cares. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a single really policy thing he did.
He lost to Jimmy Carter.
Another one-term. I mean, come on, I think who cares for him.
Yeah. Who cares? He didn't do much, literally. He pardoned Nixon.
Pardon Nixon. Peace signs. Hey guys, Andy here. Sorry to interrupt this video, but real quick, I have to let you guys know that we had a technical problem. Our rest of the file of our faces, our beautiful mugs here, got corrupted, so it will not be part of the video. Don't you worry, you will still see the rest of our tier ranking, and the rest of the audio will still be on there. You just will not see our faces also on the screen. Sorry about that, but what can you do? Technology can suck sometimes. Okay, back to the show. Moving on, Ashton, to the ex-general of the Union Army, Ulysses S. Grant.
Andy, I gotta give him a F.
Jeez, why so bad?
Because his cabinet was completely corrupt. He did a bad job managing it for all 8 years of his presidency. He didn't really move stuff forward during Reconstruction. I believe most Reconstruction bills actually got passed after he was president than during. But either way, he's a great guy. He did a great job as general. He just wasn't a good president.
I actually got him at the C tier. I think he's just average, didn't do much, but didn't really hurt the country either. So I'm going to put him at a D tier. And there with Carter and Bush. What a lovely, lovely group. Moving on, Ashton, is good old Harding.
Who cares?
Yep, that's fine with me. Didn't do much really. Don't really care about him. Rutherford B. Hayes, Ashton, another big boy, but not as big as Taft.
Well, he's gonna go. Who cares?
Andrew Jackson, Ashton. I got on. This is gonna.
Mm,
I got him at a D tier. I really want to put him at an F because I think he's awful. I think he's an awful man. I think the Trail of Tears was just despicable what he did. But he did some good things for the country, so I had to put him in the D tier.
I'll agree with D tier just because his historical significance, but besides that, he was a terrible person.
Awful, awful person. Racist, just terrible person. But moving on to someone who's also racist, but I wouldn't say as bad as a person, hopefully, and that's Thomas Jefferson, one of our founding fathers. It's a
Mm,
tough one for you, isn't it?
I'll go B. Like,
I actually agree with that.
yeah, to me, he has a lot of flaws, especially modern day flaws. But for the time, he was very in the norm, and he did a lot of good things for the country. Um, he was kind of a jerk.
I think that I know a lot of people out there are going to be kind of hurt that we put Jefferson so low on this list because a lot of people idolize Jefferson. But
Mm,
you got to think of it. Jefferson did an amazing job with the Constitution. There's no question about it. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution of America is one of the greatest pieces of any kind of writing in the history of mankind. Just is what it is. But the Constitution was written when he was not president, and we're doing a presidential tier list of what you did as president. And as president, he was fine, but he's a little overrated,
mm-hmm.
in my opinion. I don't know if you can agree with that one, Ashton.
As a president, yes, I think people mix his life up with his presidency.
Hmm. Next on the list is the one before Jefferson, his predecessor, and that is John Adams.
Mm,
I'm gonna go with the C tier, Ashton. I think he was average. He didn't do a lot. He wasn't the best for the country in a time when it was kind of still trying to build itself from basically building the country itself after the most beloved president of all time, George Washington.
yeah, I
You
agree with you.
follow up with a man who is as boring and whose wife is better than him in every regard.
Yeah.
So average. Let's put him right there. Moving right along, Ashton, and that is another impeached president right after Lincoln. So he had a big shoes to fill, and that is Andrew Johnson.
I gotta say F.
I would probably say D, but F is F. I think his problem was he did nothing at all in a time when you had to do something, and that he will always be known for the person who did nothing and hurt the country more than helping it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think being Lincoln's vice president and not following Lincoln's wish after he gets killed to kind of heal the nation by not, or heal the nation by being very, very forceful in the South. I just feel like he went easy in the South because he was a Southerner himself.
Yeah, and that's you got when you play favoritism, you just really can't govern effectively, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why you need to be really separate from things like that. But moving on to a really beloved president,
Mm-hmm.
JFK, and I will start with this one. I think JFK gets a lot more love than I'm not going to say is warranted because he was an amazing president. I'll go ahead and say I'm putting him as an A tier. And I think that's very respectable. And I know a lot of people want him in that S tier, but I think that your image is kind of blurred of him because of him getting killed. And I'm not trying to be like offensive with that. But if he was not murdered, I think he would still be a very good president, but not this. Wow, he's one of the best. He did a lot of good. NASA was amazing. His policies furthered the country when it came to equality, all that stuff was amazing. And and LBJ, his predecessor, continued his legacy. And I will give JFK the A tier, but I just do not think he's an S tier worthy. Very few presidents are.
I gotta give him the S tier, Andy. I think JFK, of course he'll get moved down to A because you put him as a, but just in my eyes, he had everything a great president needs. He had poise. He was able to handle domestic issues on top of diplomatic issues perfectly,
Mm.
especially when no one expected him to
I
do
wouldn't
well.
say the failed Bay of Pigs invasion was very perfect diplomacy.
I mean,
That's why I got it. He's got some flaws.
I
He's a
mean,
great president, but
a
he's got
lot of
flaws.
presidents would have exploded the entire world during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Imagine a certain current president in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh no.
Rock.
Oh no. Um, but in all seriousness, I think he is beloved for a reason, not just because he died. So I got to give him that S tier.
Moving on, Ashton, to Garfield. Not the cat, the president. Who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Who cares?
it's sad when your last name, the cat's more famous than you are. I mean, let's be honest. You think of Garfield, you're not thinking of the president. You think of the orange cat.
He's more proof that even if someone tries to kill you, doesn't mean you'll be famous for it.
Yes, Ashton. Moving on to the killed president's predecessor, JFK. That's LBJ, and I'm gonna stick him also with. I'll put him. It's tough because the Vietnam War is his biggest problem, and that's a huge problem because we should not have been in that war, but we were.
I'll say C because his domestic policy was really great. He did a good job pushing the country on social lines and pushing for equality. I believe the um, Social Rights Act was under
It
this
was.
president. Um, but his foreign policy, like you said, was not good. So I think those balance him out for a C
I
tier.
will say, Ashton, because you said C tier, I think he deserves to belong in the B tier. So I'm gonna put him actually as an A tier president, so that it can counteract and put it at the B tier. I will put him at the B tier. I think he's just a little bit better than John Adams was because John Adams had bad foreign policy and bad domestic policy. So, but I think really that Civil Rights Act really just pushes him over the top from being average. Like anybody that does something like that after years and years and years of discrimination and problems with the African American community and any community of color that's not white is going to be more than average to me.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, Ashton, to I know one of your favorite presidents of all time and
Mm-hmm.
is Lincoln, and I think we can both agree that he belongs in the S tier.
Yes.
I mean, no other, obviously, hopefully, never again. No other president, and never again will have to deal with a civil war in this country, a real civil war where thousands and thousands and thousands of Americans died. Emancipation Proclamation was another one of the greatest pieces of written literature of all time,
Mm-hmm.
and the man himself is just such a fascinating man.
Yeah, he went through a lot for this country. And he put the country through a lot, but not on purpose. And he tried to guide the nation through one of its darkest chapters. And he did, he put the country back together. Uh, we don't know how fully healed it's been, but I just gotta say, he is. There's a reason why he's one of the standard presidents you look at. He just did so much. He was so wise for his age, and he had such poise dealing with family tragedy on top of everything else going on, and he gave his life for the nation. So I definitely got to put him up there in that S tier.
Well, going from our first S tier is someone who I don't care about. That's William Harrison.
I don't know.
So there's a lot of who cares presidents, and you can see a lot of them are from the 80s and early 90s area because that's kind of the point of like no one cares about you guys. They're all just like
Early 19th century, early 20th.
not all of them are single term presidents, but like a lot of them are, and it's like they come in, do nothing, and leave. So that's why we're gonna see. Hopefully, we're almost done with all of these. Who cares? I think we got a couple left, a couple stinkers there. But moving on to a big stinker, John Quincy Adams. Worse than his father? I think so.
Yeah, I gotta put him at that F tier.
I would put him more at the D tier. I don't think he's an awful person. I think he's just a bad president. But I understand where you would put him in F, so he goes in the F tier.
I think he was like when it comes to terms of job, like he did pretty bad. I believe he was president for the first recession the country went through. Didn't manage that well. I guess you convinced me. You can put him at D tier.
First convincing.
Yeah,
Just
you
bam.
convinced me. He was bad, but he wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
He wasn't like I don't ever want to see his face again in a history book. Bad.
William McKinley. Who cares? Dude,
Uh, D.
D.
D. I mean, he fought the Spanish American War and won it. He kind of created or made up reasons to take Cuba, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico away, just so we could have it. He was very imperialistic. Um, he was fine. He wasn't a terrible person. He did lie about Spanish people.
James Monroe, Ashton. I'm gonna put him at the. I got him at the C tier.
Yeah, C tier. He was average. He had a good foreign policy idea with the Monroe Doctrine. You know, trying to keep Europeans out of the Northern
So
American
that we could take him
hemisphere.
over instead.
Yes.
Very, very smart for Monroe there. Richard Nixon, F tier.
Yeah.
Solely because he's one of the only ones that I wouldn't say he's the only one who's cheated, but like been caught cheating. So he's bad. He's bad. He's just bad.
He's a terrible person.
I will give him one credit only, and he started the environmental movement. Shockingly, you don't think about Nixon starting the environmental movement, but it wasn't him solely. But he was the first. He was the president that allowed Earth Day and all these kind of things to start forming. So
EPA.
I will allow him. I will give him the credit there, but nothing can top that impeachment, because Clinton's impeachment was bad, but it was about a scandal.
Trump's impeachment.
It's a scandal with an affair of his intern. It's not a trying to cheat to win the White House. That's completely different.
I would say Trump's impeachment was worse than Nixon's.
Going on, Obama, I got him at the I don't know. I think he's better than Bush. I got him at the B tier.
I agree, B tier. I think Obama had a lot of great motivations for some of the things he did, and he did try to do sweeping things. But Obamacare had some flaws. He did a lot to try to bring the country socially forward. Um, I feel like he was one of those presidents that really struggled to work with the opposition. You know,
Yep.
some of it was, I believe, his fault. Some of it wasn't. Some of the opposition just didn't want to work with him at all because of circumstances. He did recover from
Yep,
a
100%.
recession, a very bad recession. So he's a B tier. He's above average.
Yep. I don't agree with all his policies, Ashton. I know both me and you, I'm an independent that leans a little bit more to the right. So I don't agree with all of his policies. I think his Medicare for all, the Obamacare policy was
it wasn't Medicare for all.
it was a good idea, but bad execution, in my opinion. I do like some of the tax credits and tax help he gave to parents with college education children. I stuff like that. His environmental policies were good, but didn't really get any effectiveness. So a lot of, I think, Obama you can summarize with good ideas, no good execution. Now that was his fault. You have now a terrible partisanship, not bipartisanship, but terrible division in this country, and it wasn't his fault for everything. But you got to find a way to work through it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what being a good president is. I mean, Lincoln was at a time which maybe even was worse partisanship, and he kept the country together. I mean, obviously, but like you said, got to give him credit for coming out of recession. Like, that's a huge deal. That's why president and just a couple things is going to be high on the list as well, in my opinion. But moving on to the one-term wonder, George H.W. Bush, following one of the most well-loved presidents of all time, Ronald Reagan.
I gotta give him a B tier, Andy. I thought the economy was good under him. I mean, the fall of the Berlin Wall happened during him. He was just a good steward. I think he lost re-election because of a bad campaign, not because of his job as president.
I'm borderline B and C tier, Ashton. I think I'll side with you on this one. I think a big, not a, definitely not a. One of his biggest problems was read my lips, no new taxes, and the new taxes. So that was a huge reason why he lost the election. I don't think it really was the policies per se. It was legit, straight up lying to the American people and having no charisma to speak of. So on top, like if you have charisma and lie to the American people, like a student president, you can get away with it a lot. But he couldn't. And something with taxes, you don't mess with people's taxes. They don't like paying taxes in this country. I don't think anyone really loves paying taxes, but Polk, Ashton, good old Polk. Does anyone care?
No, no one cares.
Moving on to my favorite president of all time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, just because he's my favorite does not mean I want him in the S tier, because he is not an S tier president. He has flaws. Everyone's got flaws. He's one of the best, if not best, foreign policy presidents of all time. What he did with World War II and the peace he was trying to work with Russia, that honestly, if his predecessors would have been not Harry Truman, probably would have worked. At least we wouldn't have the same relations we would today. Now, his domestic policies, the new things he created with the New Deal, some of them worked, some of them were not. I can agree with anyone that wants to debate that, but I put him in the A tier for everything he did with the Great Depression, the war, and just being one of the probably the most well loved presidents of all time. At least him being a 4-term president or almost 4-term president.
I gotta agree with you. He's
Woo! I thought you were about to say something like F tier, and I would have been so sad.
no, you know me. I'm not super high on FDR and certain things. Like his court packing was pretty bad, especially like kind of how it was last second. Like, oh, you're not gonna give me what you want. I'm gonna instantly try to favor the court to get my laws through, especially when some of them weren't working in that circumstance. But he was really, really great war president. He was able to communicate to the American people effectively why we were fighting the war. Um, it took him longer than he wanted to get in the war, but we ended up getting in the war. He did a good job. He does lose some points in my book for running for multiple terms. I get it was at like crazy circumstances, but to me, two terms are 2 terms is a good limit for a president, and there's a reason for that because you start losing some of that reality of not having all that power. If you're there for past 8 years, you just get used to the power, and that's a bad thing.
Yeah, Ashton, we did make one mistake. We actually said Polk when I meant to say Pierce earlier, but I think we can keep Pierce also in that who cares tier.
Yeah.
But so we already established Polk as who cares, so let's put Polk there, and we move. we, I mean, poor Polk. Am I right? I mean, who cares about Polk? But we move on to Quincy Adams.
Who cares?
I mean, I get him at the D tier, so I'll do who cares. I mean, I don't care about Quincy. There's a lot of who cares presidents, and that's sad. Ronald Reagan, Ashton. This is gonna. You start. I'm still debating where I want him.
I gotta put him at S. You know, he does have some blemishes, just because it's like how Lincoln has the whole thing where he suspended habeas corpus. Lincoln or Reagan has Iran Contra. Like S tier doesn't mean they're perfect. It just means that they are the ideal president that every president should live up to. You know, foreign policy, he was the reason why the Berlin Wall came down, how he pushed American culture and society. He was a steward of a great economy and recovery. And really, that lasted almost until the 90s. I think Reagan doesn't get enough credit for that 90s economy. Um, and just in total, Reagan was effective in projecting this kind of prosperity and unity that we really need nowadays. And you know, there's a reason why he's one of the few people to win 49 states or more. Or let's say win every state but one.
A tier. I know that hurts you, but I cannot. Reagan was an amazing person, amazing charisma, amazing, well loved. I love Reagan, but his environmental policies were one of the worst after coming after Carter. I mean, he took away things that Carter stood for no reason other than just because he wanted to. I think he was up there with FDR and the best foreign policy presidents of all time. I mean, with Russia, got us out of the Cold War. I think his economics were good in the short term, but they were not good in the long term because it was a lot about big spending. Big spending caused a lot of debt in this country when it comes to the debt in total. Now, if you live in the 80s and 90s, you know you had good economy, but it contributed to some of the recession in 2009. It wasn't his fault, but it contributed to it. That's the A tier. I think he's an amazing president. I mean, if you win 49 states, you can't be below an A tier. You have to be in the 90 to 100 range. So it doesn't mean I don't love him. It's just he's there with JFK and FDR. I mean, he's in great company. Taylor Ashton, not Tyler. Taylor.
Taylor.
We'll get to Taylor later. Taylor, guys. Taylor.
Who cares? all that bumbling. Who cares? Another one of those mid 19th century presidents. Didn't do much to stop Civil War from happening.
Yep.
Just kind of was like, okay, let's keep on balancing out the free and slave states and hope it doesn't all crumble. Headman.
Mount Rushmore president Teddy Big Stick Roosevelt. I got him at the A tier, Ashton. Great with military prowess, Rough Rider, busted up the banks, busted up the monopolies. I mean, he did everything right. Well loved, great with the Park Service. Got to be A tier.
He's S tier for me, Andy.
Ooh, actually,
I mean, you just said it all, and what did he do wrong? I mean,
fine, Ashton, you convinced me. He's S tier.
He was a great president. He's someone I look up to, and the more like I know in history class I wasn't ever interested in him. I was like, oh, he's kind of a weird guy. He ran for a third party. Why'd he do that?
He's got a mustache.
Bull Moose Party. More and more I look into him. I look up to him. I think he fought for what he believed in. And that's something to be respected for.
Yeah, Ashton. Let's go from S tier to Donald Trump. I'll start because he's a D tier for me. He is not the worst president in my opinion. That's biased. There's good things about Trump. As much as it's hard for me to say that, there is good things about Trump. He attempted a good police bill. I'm not saying it was perfect. He cared about kids with autism and mental needs, and he was good with the military and VA when it comes to increasing their budget and trying to help. All those things perfect that he did? No. Does he have terrible presidency when it comes to scandals and policies? Yes. But to me, he's a D tier president on the merits of what he did, not of who he is, if that makes sense. But I'm sure you're going to not agree with me.
No, I see your point. I mean, I don't think he's the worst president of all time, but I gotta put him F because I just think he's done so much damage to institutions and faith in institutions when it comes to a lot of people on one side of the aisle, and that is something that's going to take a long time to fix. And to me, a F president is someone who doesn't only just sit there and do nothing, but does active damage that other presidents coming afterwards have to fix, like Nixon.
Gerald Ford.
Like,
man, is Biden gonna be Gerald Ford? Oh no, poor Biden, man. If he's Gerald, that's sad.
He would be more like Jimmy Carter in that situation.
Yeah, I guess. 1-term president.
We'll see.
All right, Ashley. Moving on to Truman. I'm letting you start because whatever you're gonna put's we're gonna have to average it up because we'll get to mine in a second. But you start with Truman here. Harry Truman.
He's an average to me. See.
F. I hate him. I hate him so much. I hate Harry Truman. He's one of the worst presidents ever because he come after my boy FDR and literally said, that's nice. Get it out of my office. And completely changed everything about America. in my opinion. I hate Truman. He ruined every single foreign policy that FDR tried to do, not counting the Red Scare started under his watch, and it discriminated against many, many Americans and caused fear in this country, which was not needed with his antics. I hate him. It's an F tier, but I'll put him at the D because his name's Harry. Here's Tyler, not Taylor. Who cares?
Who cares?
Another one of those presidents that did nothing other than nothing. Van Buren, maybe the same. Who cares? Other than his name's pretty cool.
I'll put him in D tier for that hair. That hair deserves a D tier.
Last two, Ashton, and they couldn't be more different, and that is George Washington. Obviously, we're going to put him in the S tier. I mean, there's no debate. First president, only president to ever be unanimously voted in to this country. I know
there's a reason for that.
Completely different time as well, but come on.
He was a great president.
He's George Washington.
In my opinion, he's the only former general military member to go in that presidency and be great, be a great politician. To me, he really captures the perfect tone of what a president should be, making the job not about him, but about the people he serves.
Yeah, there's no one else that can be in that tier above him, at least right now, and that's got to be Washington. Like, he's the end-all be-all president. He didn't want parties. Parties came after him. Not counting also, because we can't count that, he created this country. He didn't create this country, but American Revolution, he was the general of the entire army. So, I mean, this man was huge in everything we did. Yeah. And finishing up this tier list with Woodrow Wilson.
Ugh. He won World War I, but that's like, I would say he's D.
I'll do C. B, maybe. I'll do B. Let's put
him as average.
He was a
big racist.
I'll put him as average. He's an average player. He's like Johnny Adams. He's fine. I think he's fine. But guys, we did all of it. We did all 45 presidents in our tier ranking. We have 3 in the S, 3 in the A, so forth, so on. But any shockers there that you guys see, let us know in the comments. You know, we had a lot of fun doing this. This is our tier list. This is how we feel consensus-wise. I know difference. His rating would be A. My rating would be his rating would be an S. My rating would be an A. So our our ranks would be a little bit different. But consensus, This is how it is. But thank you for joining us in a very special, very fun edition of the Political Perch Podcast. Come back next week for another video. Join us Friday for the Presidential Smackdown. That will be fun. Hit the subscribe button. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next week.